Hi! In this video, we'll discuss metabolism and metabolic pathways. The word metabolism refers to all of the chemical reactions that take place within cells. That's a lot, and it's fantastically complicated. This diagram shows just some of those chemical reactions. Yikes! But don't freak out. You'll definitely not need to master everything in this figure. So let's simplify a little bit. What kind of metabolic pathways do we even have? Metabolism, it refers to a lot, but we can largely categorize metabolic pathways into just a few categories. First, we have pathways that take food molecules and break it down. This accomplishes a couple of things. One thing it accomplishes is that it turns the energy stored in the bonds of food molecules into a form of energy that's usable by the cell, so it can do other things. And also, it provides the building blocks for larger molecules. Second, we also have metabolic pathways that are used for building larger molecules from smaller molecules. We have to do that. Cells need to constantly be building molecules such as proteins out of amino acids and RNA from nucleotides, just to name a couple. So, we're talking about breaking down molecules and also building up molecules. And we're going to give those processes a couple of fancy names. When we're breaking molecules down into smaller pieces, we will call that catabolism. So any reaction that's breaking molecules down is a catabolic reaction. And a pathway that breaks something down in a stepwise fashion is a catabolic pathway. And on the other hand, if we're building something up, we'll call that anabolism. Anabolic reactions and anabolic pathways make larger molecules from smaller molecules. Easy way to remember? Well, you probably heard of anabolic steroids. Sometimes people take these if they want to get super jacked up. So think anabolic building. And if you really need another cue, well, think about cats. I've owned cats before, and some of them are little whirlwinds of pure destruction. Cats love, for example, to knock things off other things, sometimes breaking them in the process. So you can think about catabolic cats breaking things. Okay, quick quiz. Look at this reaction. This shows alanine plus alanine, and let's join them together to make a dipeptide. Is it anabolic or catabolic? Well, this is anabolic because we are building something from smaller things. How about this reaction? Lactose plus water react to form galactose plus glucose. Anabolic or catabolic? Well, this is catabolic. We're breaking down a disaccharide into two monosaccharides. All right, what about this pathway? A little longer, a little more complicated. This shows the making of glycogen, a complex carbohydrate out of glucose. Is this catabolic or anabolic? This is anabolic. We're building something large from smaller subunits. And by the way, these two types of reactions have a relationship to energy that we're going to dive into a little bit more later. If we're building something up, this requires us to put in energy. So anabolic reactions require energy. And if we're breaking something down, that releases energy. So catabolic reactions release energy. Back to this amazingly complicated diagram. Again, no need to worry about the level of detail here, but let's point out just a couple of things, and we'll zoom in to do that. Okay, here we are in the part of the figure that is dealing with simple carbohydrates. Let's notice two things. First, we have arrows between chemical structures, meaning that one thing is being changed or converted into another thing. And second, next to each of these arrows, we have the name of something in blue. Those are names of enzymes. And enzymes are something we really need to understand to grasp what's happening inside a cell. Here's a part of a pathway showing the enzymes and their structures. This metabolic pathway, once again, shows how glucose is converted into glycogen. Glucose is a simple sugar, and we use it for energy. More specifically, we break it down in a stepwise fashion and use the energy released from breaking the chemical bonds in order to produce ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which remember is the energy molecule that cells use when they need to do something that requires an input of energy, at least most of the time. But what if you eat too much glucose? I mean, not like I've ever done that, but let's say you did. It would be advantageous for us to store some of that glucose for future use. Animals and fungi and bacteria store glucose as glycogen. It's a polysaccharide made out of monosaccharides, those are the monomers, and basically it's branched chains of glucose. We as humans store glycogen mainly in the liver and the muscles, and we can access it if we need to make more ATP. For example, let's say that we're running a marathon. We'll break down the glycogen into glucose and use it for energy. Okay, so back to this pathway. The first step is catalyzed by an enzyme called glucokinase. Enzymes are great because their names make sense most of the time, all except for a few that were named before enzyme naming conventions really became a thing. If the word or phrase ends with A's, we're looking at an enzyme, and the rest of the name should give you a clue about what it does. So in this case, glucokinase. Kinase, it means something that adds a phosphate group. So glucose kinase is an enzyme that adds a phosphate group to glucose. And you can also see that all of the enzymes in this pathway are proteins, and each enzyme catalyzes one step in this metabolic pathway. And that's going to be true for all of the metabolic pathways that we look at in the cell. They rely on enzymes at each step of the pathway, different enzyme for each step usually, because enzymes are extremely specific. And we'll explore that more in the next video.